Today I'm going to be making a new no-sew junk journal just using the paper scraps that I already have lying around, and I'm going to take you through the process of how I make this. So as my inspiration for this journal, I picked out a couple of ones that I've worked in previously because I really enjoyed the size of these journals. So they are slightly smaller than even a 4x6 inch journal, and I tend to just sort of like eyeball what sort of size I want my journal to be and almost just like what size feels good to then be working in with however I want to use my different materials. So I just decided to trace around the journal there, as you can see, and just use that as my rough guide for the size. So for the cover, I'm just using some cardboard packaging here just to provide something that's a bit more sturdy as a base for the cover. And the great thing about these no-sew junk journals is that as long as you've got those two covers that are pretty much the same size, you're kind of away then, and you can use all sorts of different papers, as I will show you in a moment. So just to make them a little bit prettier, because I mean, I love like brown paper and packaging, but I felt like I needed to make the cover a little bit more interesting. So I'm just using some scrapbook paper here, which will add a little bit more reinforcement as well to the cardboard, and as you can see, makes them look nice and pretty there with the floral pattern. So here is my stash of different papers that I'm going to be using. As you can see, I've got a real mix of different papers here, everything from tea-dyed book papers to brown paper and some more plainer pieces as well. So I'm going for a neutral collaged scrappy base, as I always do with a lot of these journals, and I think the great thing about using that as your base is it then gives you a lot of options with what you want to add to it. So when I'm thinking about the papers I want to pick for a journal like this, I'm just thinking about like what would lend itself to the most amount of like different ways that I could take a page, and what will add a bit of interest but also leave enough blank space for me to be able to come in and work on the pages. So it's a little bit of a balance between having something to respond to and then also having that space to create in it. And I really like using this method for making these no-sew journals because you can use up all of those scrap papers that you have lying around. Even like this, I've got something that I've pulled from just the recycling, and it already had a little bit of a sticky label that I could then use as a way of binding it into this journal. So it doesn't have to be something that's the same size as the journal you're working on. Like you can use smaller pieces and create a bit of a patchwork effect, or you can sort of mix and match it with a few larger pieces, as you'll see that I do, like pages that have just one or two papers on it versus a page that might be made up of like 3 or 4 different pieces, and you just get a lot of different interest and textures that build up when you create them like that. So all I'm using is just a bog standard glue stick. My favorite brand to use is just a Pritt stick. And I don't find that I have any issues with journals staying together. You'll notice I'm also using a few pieces of masking tape. That's the kind of larger cream tape that I'm using. That is great just for adding a bit of texture as well as also a bit more reinforcement. You could also use, and I've used it in other journals as well, you could use washi tape, and that's a good way to add different patterns as well. So if you have 2 pieces that you've stuck together, you could maybe add the washi tape on the part where they join, just again for that reinforcement and also a bit of visual interest for the pages. And I just really enjoy the process of putting together a new journal, obviously, because I feel like I'm not alone in saying that just making a new journal is one of the best parts of journaling, because I just love having a new journal to work in, but also putting together these different pages and kind of thinking about the different papers that I might want to use. And there are a few places as well you can see where I've done like plainer pages with some text, or even a few that have imagery and a bit of wording on them as well as I go through. So I was trying not to get too wrapped up in actually making like something that was more of a journal page, because you'll notice there was one I made with like a nice like blue floral image there, and I had the wording as well. And when I did it, I almost thought, you know what, I could just add like a few bits of detailing to that, like, you know, different mark making. And I've probably like accidentally already made one of the first pages, because there's absolutely no way that I'll be covering up any of those elements. So I am going to be precious about those, because I was just going to say, like, obviously when you're building a base like this, you don't want to be too precious about the papers that you are including, because, you know, however you work, whether it's with collage, whether it's with like paints, different medium, mixed media as well, like you will end up covering these up much in the same way as you do with other junk journals that you might work in. So obviously we are just creating that base, and we will end up working on top of it. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking about when I'm picking the papers that I want to be using. But also one of the fun things as well when you make these no-sew journals, I think, is that you kind of work your way along, and generally I have it sort of facing one side, and then as I go through, I'll kind of flip it over and sort of think, oh, like there's a surprise, like look what it looks like on the other side. Because then when you work in these journals, you obviously go from one side to the other, and then you can turn it over, so it's like double-sided. And I think that's really interesting as well, because with different like collaging, sometimes when you glue something down, you know, when you have to decide like which piece am I going to use, like which side is going to be the best to be like facing up, but it's almost like you don't have to make that decision with a no-sew journal, because when you attach it to the page, you kind of get like the best of both worlds, I suppose, with that. So it's always really interesting to see how the pages come together, especially when you're not necessarily working on the reverse side. So yeah, it's always interesting how they turn out on the journals. But I was just adding a few smaller little bits here, because I had some pages, like I said, where I'd only used like maybe one or two like larger elements, and so I kind of wanted just to come in and add a little bit of something, because they felt like they were too plain, I guess. So I couldn't let them go without adding a little bit of collage to them, a little bit of interest. I love adding crumpled brown paper packaging to these journals as well. So I think I've ended up with around about maybe 13 double page spreads, I think, by the time you count both sides of this journal. So it's not like a massive journal, because I was definitely trying to not add too much, because obviously allowing for bulk to be added to the journal. And also, I mean, when you work in a no-sew journal anyway, if you decide that you want to add more pages in, it's a lot easier than with a bound journal, because all you need to do is just cut it in half and then just like add your extension in the middle. So there's definitely the option I have there for adding in extra pages, but I just wanted to keep it to a fairly like decent amount of pages, just so that I wasn't feeling too overwhelmed with then coming to work within this journal. So I don't have a specific purpose necessarily for this one. Like, I'm not following a specific challenge, or I don't have a specific theme in mind. I kind of just want it to be like a place to play, like the way that I've got the paint sample journal that I'm still working on. I've got that on the go, and it's a bit more relaxed. So I don't know, I'll take you along with me obviously with creating pages in this journal, but I'm looking forward to diving into something new after I finished my altered book. And you'll notice I also rounded the corners of this one as well, which I just think adds a nice finishing touch to the journal. So I hope you enjoyed the process of making this little mini no-sew junk journal. Let me know in the comments what journals you're working on at the moment, and I will see you in the next one.